Does the traction control system stop you from ever losing grip and makes you always accelerate as fast as possible? How do traction control systems work and when are they useful? Let's get started with the purpose of traction control systems. The purpose of traction control systems is to prevent slip of the rear wheel, which means a loss of traction. To understand this better, we have to make clear what is slip. In a theoretical way, I would explain it like this. Slip is the difference between the intended and the actual speed of the rear wheel. But to understand it better, let's get to a real-life example. You're standing on a wet road, for example, with your motorcycle, and you try to accelerate. And your rear wheel is spinning, but you're not immediately moving. This means that your rear wheel is slipping. If that's not enough, it can also be experienced in cars, for example, when you try to accelerate on snow. I wouldn't do that with a motorcycle, by the way. So this is slip. And it can also be quite dangerous. Imagine you're in a corner and you lean your motorcycle and then you try to accelerate and you're slipping. That's why traction control systems are quite useful. And I should add some relevant information at this point, which is that a tiny bit of slip is necessary in motorcycles to accelerate them, which means that your rear wheel is spinning a little bit faster than your front wheel. Because motorcycles are rear wheel driven and otherwise you couldn't accelerate them at all. When your rear wheel, for example, has twice the speed of your front wheel, then that's definitely an amount of slip that you don't want to have, and you might lose traction and your traction control system should definitely do something. Okay, so far we know what slip is, why we don't want too much slip. And now we can go to the next point, which is how can slip actually be detected? So we measure the speed of the rear wheel and we measure the speed of the front wheel. And if the speed of the rear wheel is much higher than the speed of the front wheel, then we get slip and the traction control system will do something. Traction control systems are already a bit more advanced than ABS. And this means that motorcycles which have traction control systems already have ABS and therefore already have the ABS sensors. And the good thing is, for the traction control system functions, we can use the ABS sensors, which measure the speeds of the two wheels. Simply using the ABS sensors is the simplest way to detect slip for the traction control system. But nowadays there are already more advanced traction control systems which work with a bit more detail. They use IMUs, for example, as well, which stands for Inertial Measurement Unit. IMUs are quite useful because they can detect changes in pitch, yaw and roll. Roll is something similar to lean when we talk about motorcycles and not about airplanes, which is the area where IMUs are usually used. Okay, so far we know what slip is, how slip can be detected, but we still want to know what the traction control system does to prevent the slip. There are many different ways to do this, but they have one thing in common, and this is power reduction. To be specific, it's a reduction of the moment of the engine. Possibility number one is to cut the fuel, which means that no fuel gets injected and therefore there will be no explosion in this cycle. Another quite helpful possibility to completely cut the moment of the engine is to cut the ignition or to spark, which means that there will be no spark and therefore the air-fuel mixture also doesn't explode. There's another quite interesting way to not stop the engine's moment completely, but to reduce it so softly that you don't realize it at all. And it is to delay the ignition angle. This means that the ignition happens a little bit later, and this reduces the engine's peak power. Last but not least, also the opening angle of an electronically controlled throttle valve can be reduced. Earlier, I mentioned that traction control systems use ABS sensors. Nowadays, most motorcycles have ABS. But do you need ABS when you already have a traction control system and the other way around? To learn more about the importance of ABS, watch my ABS video here.